to assist and to protect those parts of that operation that were there simply to detain Nicolás Maduro and bring him back to face US justice. Now, that in itself will raise a whole host of complex issues. There will still, of course, be questions, as we've heard, from legal experts, etc., about whether or not that is going to satisfy those who believe that this is against the UN Charter. I don't think it will, but I think that is the basis on which the Trump administration will say it didn't need to go to Congress. They have said they will organize a briefing, so those people are going to be briefed, but after the event.
Let's go back to New York. Colombia, who called this special session of the Security Council, are speaking. Let's listen in.
The Charter of the Organization of American States. It's also important to understand the dimension of this situation for international peace and security beyond our region, particularly when a permanent member of the Security Council takes the decision to use force and assume control unilaterally of another sovereign state, with the aim, amongst other things, of taking its natural and strategic resources. This is very worrisome for the international community, the international order that was established after the Second World War, and flagrantly violates international law and is in clear contradiction with the United Nations Charter and the very goal for which this council was created. If
Thank you for watching.
Particularly a country that is a permanent member of this council disregards international law that we designed in San Francisco, what then is the role of this council, and where are the foundations for international peace and security? We are accepting that the law and the interests of the strongest prevail over multilateralism and over agreements that we have forged with dialogue and diplomacy in this very chamber. Democracy cannot be promoted or defended through violence or coercion, and it cannot be superseded either by...
So we're listening in to Colombia, who brought this special session, strictly speaking, an ally to the United States, but Donald Trump has threatened the Colombian president as well, Gustavo Petro, calling him sick.
Thank you all for watching.
Is unmistakable. It's that if you don't do what we want, then maybe you could face the same, and that is why the Colombian representative is speaking out in such strong terms. Let's focus just in the interim. We're waiting for Russia and China to speak, but let's focus in the interim on the oil. We can speak to...
I'm going to be giving you as much as possible, what I can, from the Security Council. Next, we're going to hear what Russia had to say. Believe it or not, Russia, who we know really put us up to this, is going to sit there and tell us about the norms. And unfortunately, because our president is who he is, they're now going to have the right to do so. This is why this matters.
About the country with the largest oil reserves in the ground, even though they're relatively costly. You know, we're not talking about Saudi Arabia or Iran or Iraq, where it costs about $10 per barrel to bring oil out of the ground. Here, it's probably more around $50 per barrel, maybe even more. So there's the reserves. And the third point is the fiscal terms. It's fiscally the legal contract that you're able to sign, and how much of the profit goes back to you versus how much goes back to the state. There are examples of countries where you have a lot of reserves, but companies are just not going in there or try to exit, such as Iraq, because the fiscal terms are not great.
Just very quickly, we're about to go to the Russian representative, but it's heavy oil. It's extra heavy crude oil. Why is that important to these big nations?
Because historically, most of the refineries built, especially in the US Gulf Coast, were built and designed to process Venezuelan crude and also crude from the Middle East, which is also medium, heavy, and sour, so relatively comparable. So it's the perfect fit for US Gulf Coast refiners, but also for some of the Asian refiners, such as China. China was the largest buyer, but the oil going to China has not been going there since 10th of December.
Hamayan, thank you very much indeed for that. That tells you why Russia and China have such a deep interest in what is happening in Venezuela. Let's listen in to the Russian representative.
The U.S. act of armed aggression against Venezuela in breach of all international legal norms. In connection with the confirmed reports about the presence of the abducted president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, and his spouse in the United States, today, as we are aware, they're in New York, we call upon, corrects the speaker, the U.S. leadership to immediately release the legitimately elected president of an independent state and his spouse. Any problems existing or conflict between the United States and Venezuela need to be resolved through dialogue. And this is precisely what is enshrined in the UN Charter, the purposes and the principles of which a number of states in recent years have begun to apply selectively, depending upon the political landscape. Today, we are reaping the consequences of their recklessness and selectivity in matters related to respect for the norms of international law, which were linked to the so-called rules-based world order. Here is your rules-based world order in all of its glory, which is horrifying even the staunchest Atlanticists.
That's very important. Here is your rules-based world order. This is what Russia has been waiting for, the proof that it doesn't work, the reason to dismantle this. We have given them that leverage and that proof that this doesn't work. That's horrifying.
Mr. President, we extend our firm solidarity with the people of Venezuela in the face of the external aggression. We firmly support and completely support the policy of the Bolivarian government, which is geared towards protection of their national interests and the sovereignty of the country. Washington's aggressive acts have already been condemned by many states and multilateral associations, including the Non-Aligned Movement, the African Union, as well as a group of friends in defense of the Charter of the United Nations. We hope that the international banditry will immediately be met with objective and comprehensive assessment at the international legal level with United Nations, universal mechanisms, and other multilateral formats being brought to bear. This process must not be impacted by the recognition or non-recognition by any given states or groups of states of the legitimacy of Nicolás Maduro. For this reason, unintelligible murmurings and attempts to avoid principled assessments by those who, in other circumstances, froth at the mouth and demand that others respect the UN Charter, today seem particularly hypocritical and unseemly. We hope you will recognize this, and we hope that you will abandon double standards and that you will not attempt to justify such an egregious act of aggression due to a fear of angering the American global gendarme, which is attempting to once again rear its head. We are particularly appalled by the unparalleled cynicism with which Washington did not even attempt to conceal the true aims of its criminal operation, namely the establishment of unbridled control over Venezuela's natural resources and the assertion of their hegemonical ambitions in Latin America. In this way, Washington is generating fresh momentum for neocolonialism and for imperialism, which were repeatedly, decisively condemned and repudiated by the peoples of this region and by the global South as a whole. Distinguished colleagues, under these circumstances, it is exceedingly important for the entire international community to unite and to definitively reject the methods and tools of U.S. military foreign policy, which have been demonstrated in the case of Venezuela. This is the only way it is possible to compel Washington to revisit and to abandon their dangerous misconceptions. As we stated during previous meetings on Venezuela, the bell now tolls across the region, ringing for every country of the Western Hemisphere. The bell is ringing for all UN member states and for the future of the organization itself. Failing to hear this call today is tantamount to projecting cowardice and the lack of principle, essentially blessing ongoing encroachments of international law and rejecting civilized international conduct as a whole. We cannot allow the United States to proclaim itself as some kind of a supreme judge, which alone bears the right to invade any country, to label culprits, to hand down and to enforce punishments, irrespective of notions of international law, sovereignty, and non-intervention. Is this the world we sought to attain as we marked the 80th anniversary of the adoption of the Charter of the United Nations, when we all signed on to the relevant Security Council presidential statement? Is this the aim of United Nations reform, which we all advocate? Or has the United Nations and Security Council thereof, do they no longer exist? And is there need now to seek from Washington a patent to rule, so to speak? And is the self-determination of every person's and their right to determine their future worthless? These are the questions that we all must address today. And if this response is sincere, if it is principled, then perhaps the U.S. leadership too, which openly has asserting intention to run another country for the benefit of the United States, they will perhaps glance at their own constitution, their constitution of the United States, which begins with the words, "We the people of the United States," and will begin, in fact, to recognize the sovereignty of other states rather than deposing inconvenient regimes. Thank you.
I thank the representative.
Yeah, what we just heard there was Russia, the state that is now occupying or trying to invade and occupy Ukraine, tell us that we are the result of the rules-based world order. The idea that they're telling us that may seem funny, but the truth is, this is what they've been fighting for about 30 years. They spent 30 years infiltrating and ensuring that America, the shining light on a hill, at least we used to pretend that we were, would do something like this, stoking the elections, turning our brains into mush through propaganda, Fox News, and division, until we finally elected a doofus idiot, till we finally elected someone who would do their bidding. And now that we have illegally invaded a country, are talking about just taking over an entire hemisphere, Trump's words and the words of his people are just that. We'll go back and listen to what China has to say.
The sovereignty of other states rather than
neo-colonialism he sees in the American actions, the imperialism, the international banditry. Countries, he says, should be able to self-determine who rules them and who leads their countries. No doubt, John Sudworth, there'll be a lot of Russia's detractors around the world spotting hypocrisy in that statement.
Yes, a certain amount of irony, I think, in all of that, given its illegal invasion of sovereign
where
European
they do not
power.
show and talk over.
But of course, we would expect Russia to say that.
Show you what China has to say on our own.
It claims all sorts of
worry.
complicated legitimacies for what it's doing in Ukraine, of course. Many of them without historical or legal foundation.
Every world leader.
But you know, this is a chance for Russia to oppose American action in the Security Council, and why wouldn't
the disrespect that they just
in the end, none of this
China,
will matter.
Even though
the US
I'm
has
not
a veto in the
of
Security Council. I don't think
it's
there's even going to be a
ridiculous
resolution today. If there
Russia
was, it would.
And talk over China. But that's okay. I got you. Here's what China has to say about this unbelievable moment in world history that we are all witnessing. The next world war, if it is that, you're witnessing it, and you'll be able to tell your grandchildren. Do not look away. Let's watch.
States blatantly launched large-scale military strikes against Venezuela, forcibly seized Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, and took them out of the country. It claimed that it will run Venezuela and even didn't rule out launching a second round of military operations on an even larger scale. China is deeply shocked by and strongly condemns the unilateral, illegal, and bullying acts of the U.S. For some time now, the international community has repeatedly expressed grave concern over the U.S. sanctions, blockade, and threats of force against Venezuela. The Council convened 2 emergency meetings, during which Secretary General Guterres, many Council members, and countries in the region and beyond unanimously called for abiding by the UN Charter and the international law, maintaining calm and restraint, resolving disputes peacefully, de-escalating tensions, and safeguarding regional stability. However, as a permanent member of the Council, the U.S. has disregarded the grave concerns of the international community, wantonly trampled upon Venezuela's sovereignty, security, and legitimate rights and interests, and seriously violated the principles of sovereign equality, non-interference in internal affairs, peaceful settlement of international disputes, and the prohibition of the use of force in international relations. These principles constitute the fundamental tenets of the UN Charter and form the cornerstone of maintaining international peace and security. The U.S. has placed its own power above multilateralism and military action above diplomatic efforts, posing a grave threat to peace and security in Latin America and the Caribbean, and indeed internationally. China firmly opposes this, and the international community has also expressed widespread grave concern and strong condemnation. We urge the U.S. to heed the overwhelming voice of the international community, abide by international law and the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, cease infringing upon the sovereignty and security of other countries, stop toppling the government of Venezuela, and return to the path of political solutions through dialogue and negotiations. We call on the U.S. to ensure the personal safety of President Maduro and his wife and to release them at once. We support the Council in fulfilling its primary responsibility to maintain international peace and security, and we support all efforts by the UN Secretary General, regional countries, and organizations that contribute to promoting dialogue and de-escalating the situation. President, the lessons of history are a stark warning. Military means are not the solution to problems, and the indiscriminate use of force will only lead to greater crisis.
This is China.
The US bypassed the Council to launch military operations against Iraq, blatantly attacked Iran's nuclear facilities, and imposed economic sanctions, military strikes, and even armed occupations on multiple countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. These actions have caused persistent conflict, instability, and immense suffering for the ordinary people. Did these actions bring peace and stability? Did they bring development and prosperity? The international community sees this clearly. Venezuela is an independent sovereign state with every right to...
I need you to know China is telling us that military might is not the way to do this, not the way to go about international debate or to gain what you need, while they are eyeing Taiwan. Yes, that's why this is important. This is important not just because we did what we did, but because we have given license as a permanent member of the Security Council in the UN. When we do this, and then when we threaten to do it in 10 other places, we have now given license for the okay for this with zero consequence as a permanent member of the Security Council that we are of the UN. We have now given license to Russia, China, and even North Korea.
Defend its sovereignty and national dignity. Countries in Latin America and the Caribbean are important forces in maintaining world peace and stability and promoting global development and prosperity, and they have every right to independently choose their development paths and partners. No country can act as the world's police, nor can any state presume to be the international judge. China firmly supports the government and people of Venezuela in safeguarding their sovereignty, security, and legitimate rights and interests. We firmly support the regional countries in upholding the status of Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. We demand that the United States change its course, cease its bullying and coercive practices, and develop relations in cooperation with regional countries on the basis of mutual respect, equality, and non-interference in international affairs. China stands ready to work with the regional countries and the international community to strengthen solidarity and cooperation, uphold fairness and justice, and jointly safeguard peace and stability in Latin America and the Caribbean. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the A3 members, namely the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, and my own country, Liberia. We thank the presidency for promptly convening this important meeting. We congratulate Somalia on assuming the presidency of the Security Council this month and warmly welcome all new members. The A3 appreciates USG DiCarlo's comprehensive briefing and listened carefully to the remarks offered by civil society representatives. We also welcome the representative of Venezuela and the representatives of the region to this meeting. Mr. President, the A3 aligns itself with the recent communique of the African Union on the situation in the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and continues to monitor developments there with deep concerns. In particular, we note reports regarding the detention of President Nicolás Maduro and his wife and incidents involving Venezuelan institutions. Such developments present serious challenges not only to Venezuela's internal stability, but also underscore the imperative to safeguard the broader peace and security of the region.
So
the A3 remains steadfast
in
its commitment to the fundamental principles of international law, including the full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states as enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations in the interest of regional stability and international peace. We believe these are essential foundations for international cooperation and peaceful coexistence. Our position underscores the importance of dialogue, the peaceful settlement of disputes, and respect for constitutional and institutional frameworks. Mr. President, the complex situation in Venezuela requires a comprehensive response that is both inclusive and nationally owned. We continue to hold that a sustainable and peaceful resolution can only be found through constructive dialogue among Venezuelans themselves, with genuine respect for the aspiration and rights of the Venezuelan people, and with the constructive support of the international community. The A3 expresses its solidarity with the people of Venezuela and reiterates the African Union's commitment to peace, stability, and mutual respect among nations and regions. It's important
Weak sauce.
for all parties,
No condemnation.
both within Venezuela and in the broader international community, to exercise restraint and responsibility, upholding international law and avoiding any action that could escalate tension or threaten regional stability. The A3 stands ready to support all efforts within this council and in cooperation with regional partners to facilitate a peaceful, inclusive, and lasting resolution to the situation in Venezuela. I thank you.
He said absolutely nothing.
The representative of Liberia for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Mr. President, thank you for chairing. And I particularly want to thank you, Mr. Freitas, for your briefing. And I'll point out that Mr. Freitas is in exile, having fled the regime. Thank you for your courage, and thank you for shedding a light on the true atrocities of the illegitimate Maduro regime. This past weekend, colleagues, the United States successfully carried out a surgical law enforcement operation facilitated by the U.S. military against two indicted fugitives of American justice.
You may need to know why they call it a law enforcement operation. I need to explain that to you. 1 second. Because if it's a war, then it's illegal. If it's a law enforcement operation, then it's not. Even though they drop bombs, this is supposedly a law enforcement operation, because once they actually call it invasion or war or regime change, then it is against the charters of the UN Council, which is why they have to say those words, just so you know.
Terrorist Nicolás Maduro and Celia Flores. Colleagues, Nicolás Maduro is responsible for attacks on the people of the United States, for destabilizing the Western Hemisphere, and illegitimately repressing the people of Venezuela.
That's true.
As Secretary Rubio has said, there is no war against Venezuela or its people.
Exactly.
We are not occupying a country.
That's why they say that.
This was a law enforcement operation.
Like I said,
in furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades. The United States arrested a narco trafficker who is now going to stand trial in the United States in accordance with the rule of law for the crimes he's committed against our people for 15 years. A similar action was taken in 1989 against Manuel Noriega. He was arrested, indicted, convicted in a court of law, served in prison in the United States and in Panama, and the Panamanian people, the American people, are safer for it. And undeniably, the region was more stable.
It didn't go that well.
This law enforcement action was directed consistent with the President of the United States' responsibility as Commander-in-Chief to protect Americans at home and abroad against a fugitive who is directly responsible for narco-terrorism that has killed hundreds of thousands of Americans and created destabilizing violence throughout our hemisphere. Nicolás Maduro and his co-defendant, Celia Flores, have been transferred here to the United States to stand trial for their crimes. Maduro was indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York and faces very serious criminal charges for his involvement in a wide-ranging conspiracy to conduct narco-terrorism.
That means you have to use extradition laws. You have to be extradited in order for this any of this to be legal.
To traffic cocaine and other drugs, and conducting international weapons trafficking. The overwhelming evidence of his crimes will be presented openly in U.S. court proceedings. Colleagues, Maduro is not just an indicted drug trafficker. He was an illegitimate so-called president.
Yes,
he was not a head of state.
According to all evidence.
For
So
years, Maduro and his cronies have manipulated Venezuela's electoral system to maintain their illegitimate grip on power. In fact, just 2 years ago in 2024, a UN panel of experts report found that the election in that year was absolutely and completely a farce and fell well short of the most basic transparency and integrity measures essential to upholding credible elections. If the UN and the United Nations in this body confers legitimacy on an illegitimate narco-terrorist and the same treatment in this charter of a democratically elected president or head of state, what kind of organization is this? We should note that over 50 countries, many nations, including the European Union, including a number of Latin American countries in the region, and of course the United States, again, over 50 countries rejected the legitimacy of Maduro's re-election following the disputed 2024 elections and do not recognize him as Venezuela's legitimately elected president. Maduro unlawfully refused to peacefully cede power after the Venezuelan people voted him out of office in the 2024 election. So therefore, Maduro was a fugitive from justice. He is the head of a vicious foreign terrorist organization, Cartel de los Soles. This regime-sponsored enterprise coordinates with and relies on other vicious criminal organizations, namely Tren de Aragua.
No evidence.
Again, among others,
no
to
evidence.
Carry out its objective of using illegal narcotics as a weapon against the United States. And for its part, Tren de Aragua is a designated foreign terrorist organization with thousands of members, many of whom have unlawfully infiltrated the United States and are conducting irregular warfare and undertaking hostile actions against the American people.
No evidence.
And against the United States. It's terrorizing criminals commit brutal crimes, including murders, kidnappings, extortions, and human, drug, and weapons trafficking. This administration, President Trump, will not stand for it. In fact, in March of 2025, President Trump declared that Tren de Aragua is quote, Tren de Aragua is undertaking hostile actions and conducting irregular warfare against the territory of the United States, both directly and at the direction, clandestine or otherwise, of the Maduro regime in Venezuela. Maduro and his cronies have partnered with some of the most violent and prolific drug traffickers and narco-terrorists in the world for decades, facilitating the flood of illegal drugs coming in the United States, estimated to be several hundred tons annually. He has become rich, incredibly wealthy, off the misery of untold numbers of Americans, Venezuelans, and others, aiding and abetting international terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, coordinating with corrupt Iranian officials and other malign actors to influence not only the region, but to malignly influence the United States. In fact, in its own 2025 World Drug Report, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime identified Venezuela as a key trafficking route in the Western Hemisphere, the illegal drugs, predominantly cocaine, entering the United States and increasingly Europe. As Secretary Rubio stated just yesterday, This is the Western Hemisphere. This is where we live.
Here we go.
And we're not going to allow the Western Hemisphere to be used as a base of operation for our nation's adversaries and competitors and rivals of the United States. You can't turn Venezuela into the operating hub for Iran, for Hezbollah, for gangs, for Cuban intelligence agents, and other malign actors that control that country. You cannot continue to have the largest energy reserves in the world under the control of adversaries of the United States, under the control of illegitimate leaders,
Why
and
not?
not benefiting the people of Venezuela,
Why
and
not?
stolen by a handful of oligarchs inside of Venezuela.
Why
But
not?
it doesn't stop there. Numerous UN and international.
No, we cannot stop. We cannot. I cannot allow that as an ethical journalist to go without mentioning. Why not? We have no control over how much oil is under what and what happens to their country. Since when did the Western Hemisphere become America's? The meaning of sovereignty is dead when you say that America cannot allow the Western Hemisphere to have anybody within our hemisphere do something that we don't want. That is insane. That is insane what he just said. We cannot allow anyone within the Western Hemisphere to own oil, minerals, or anything that we want while not doing what we want them to do? That is insane. That's insanity. The man just went to the UN Council. We, as a permanent member of the UN Security Council, just said everything within our hemisphere, if they don't do what we think is right, we have the right to destroy them and take it. That's insanity. We just made a case for world war. That must be mentioned now.
National human rights organizations have issued reports documenting serious human rights abuses by the Maduro regime, including reports of extrajudicial killings, political prisoners, torture, and arbitrary and unlawful detentions. In fact, over 8 million Venezuelans have fled the country, destabilizing their neighbors in the region and creating the world's largest refugee crisis. Members of this council, colleagues, the United States wants a better future for Venezuela. We believe a better future for the people of Venezuela and for the people of the region and the world is stabilizing the region and making the neighborhood that we live in a much better and safer place. And this is why millions of Venezuelans that have fled this brutal regime are celebrating and cheering around the world.
Thank you for being here. We're going to continue on. I want you to know that we're accepting super chats. We're accepting all of the stickers and donations and hearts and just smiles and high fives as well if you don't have that. But if you want to see actual, real reporting from around the world, like we did last night live and like we're doing now, we would love the support. Thank you so much. Secondly, because we did that report last night, there are Venezuelans who are happy about what happened. But that's because they think that they really believe that they're going to be able to have an election on their own after this. They made a deal with the devil in their happiness. Maduro was not good. He was horrible. But if what you've done is traded the scorpion for the snake, I don't believe that they just went in there 3 hours, abducted the man, and did everything perfect with no casualties without help from their own military. But I don't know that for sure, so I can't say that for sure. I'm just telling you what I'm thinking. But I do know that those who are celebrating because they wanted to see Maduro gone, I hear you, I understand you. what you have just traded, what you've just traded, the maniac who you just gave, the maniac who you're praising, will not allow your elections, your freedom, your sovereignty, or your oil or your minerals to go to you. You're an animal to him and this country. It's diabolical. And we have now given the green light to China, to Russia, to North Korea, to do whatever they want, because the permanent member of the Security Council, America, says it's okay now. That's the worst part. And they said our hemisphere belongs to us. The gravity of these words cannot be overstated.
As this body pontificates, including those celebrating or including in my home state of Florida, where hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans have fled this regime's brutality. I want to reiterate, President Trump gave diplomacy a chance. He offered Maduro multiple off-ramps. He tried to de-escalate. Maduro refused to take them. President Trump made it clear that the narco-terrorism must stop, and yet it continued. The United States will not waver in our actions to protect Americans from the scourge of narco-terrorism and seeks peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States and now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Extendemos la más cordial bienvenida
I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the representatives of Bahrain, Colombia, Liberia, Latvia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and who have joined the Security Council as elected members and who are joining us today in the chamber. And we congratulate Somalia on assuming the presidency of the
This is once again more weak sauce. You know how it's going to be weak sauce when they start out with, I'd like to thank and congratulate in the midst of wartime. The platitudes are done with. Decorum is used as a weapon to cudgel the people who already are below, already underneath the foot of the powers that be. I have something else to show you, and we'll get back to what's going on there. I will tell you what we can do soon. I'm still developing the plans. Number one, make sure that you belong to, I want to make sure I get it right. There's groups that are working hard. As a matter of fact, what I'll do, I will just go ahead and show you the other thing I was working on, and that will that'll help you out. Instead of making that video, I will just show you what it is I was working on, I believe. 1 second, people. I want to make sure that we are not just giving you the doom scroll. I want to make sure that we're also giving you the things we can do. It's not like what's happening in our country. This is a global catastrophe. The reevaluating of global norms, the restructuring of the global society. There's not much that we can do, in all honesty, as it comes to that. The best thing we can do is get this guy out of here. Get this guy out of here. But if you go to answercoalition.org, answercoalition.org, I'll type it in here. They're holding the protest against war in Venezuela and everywhere else. If you go there, we need 100% in the streets. Not 50, not 99. We need 100% in the street. And those who can't be in the streets, do what I do. Spread the word. Everybody needs to be holding hands because this guy's a maniac. And judging from what our representatives just said, we're making the case for world war as if it's okay and our dominance over an entire hemisphere so that they can chop it up. East to China, middle to Russia, west to us. What? What? It's insane. We're watching insanity. Talk about what's happening in New York. Sorry, Caracas. We'll be going right back to the UN after the capitulation. Our next UN member will be Denmark. This is very important. As we have threatened Greenland over and over again, and as Mr. Miller's wife puts out TikToks and Instagrams of Greenland covered in red, white, and blue, and with the word soon on it, being frivolous, joyous, frothing at the mouth, and salivating for the chance to start another war in Greenland. We're going to need to hear what Denmark has to say right after this. All right, so they're not there yet for that one. Let's hear what Denmark has to say in the UN Security Council. Thank you for joining. I still didn't show it, did it? Hopefully you guys heard what I heard. Lord have mercy. All right, here we go. Let's hear what Denmark has to say.
For her statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Mr. President. And let me also thank Undersecretary General Di Carlo for her briefing on behalf of the Secretary General. We also listened carefully to the briefing by Ms. de Freitas and Mr. Sachs. Mr. President, Denmark joins the Secretary General in expressing deep concern over the evolving situation in Venezuela. Since this council met to discuss the situation 2 weeks ago, we have seen a drastic escalation, culminating in a large-scale military operation on January 3rd. At our last meeting, Denmark urged all actors to strictly adhere to international law and to de-escalate tensions and exercise the necessary restraint. Today, we echo the Secretary General in his concern regarding the worrying implications of this military action. Independent of the situation in Venezuela, these developments constitute a dangerous precedent. International law and the UN Charter, as a pillar of the international security architecture, must be respected by all states. Denmark recalls the foundational principle of international law that forbids states from threatening or using force against another state's territorial integrity and political independence. This imperative is enshrined in Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter. Members of the UN Security Council have a special responsibility to uphold these principles. The principles of sovereignty, political independence, and territorial integrity must be respected. The inviolability of borders is not up for negotiation. These are universal, sacrosanct principles enshrined in international law. They apply everywhere. Mr. President, once again, Denmark calls on all parties to urgently de-escalate tensions that could threaten peace and stability in the region and beyond. International disputes should be settled by peaceful means, as stated in the UN Charter. We further call on all parties to exercise maximum restraint and to engage in dialogue and diplomacy. Denmark takes note of official statements from the United States government stating that the military operations are to combat drug trafficking and stem the illicit flow of illegal narcotics. Denmark shares the priority of combating organized crime and drug trafficking, while reiterating that counter-narcotic efforts, as all other efforts, must be conducted in strict accordance with international law, including the fundamental rules and principles of the UN Charter. Mr. President, against this backdrop, Denmark wishes to recall our solidarity with the people of Venezuela. Denmark does not recognize Nicolás Maduro as the legitimate president of Venezuela, following the lack of transparency and integrity in the 2024 presidential elections, which failed to meet basic democratic standards. In Maduro's attempts to cling to power, his authoritarian regime grew increasingly oppressive. His regime bears responsibility for widespread and systematic violations of human rights against his fellow citizens, and he should be held accountable. The victims of the Maduro regime's alleged crimes against humanity have to be heard. The Venezuelan people have a right to democracy and self-determination exercised through peaceful, inclusive, and credible democratic processes, free from fear of political persecution, intimidation, or repression, and external political interference. This includes the rights of Venezuelans alone to determine their political, economic, and social future without coercion, pressure, or manipulation by external actors. No state should seek to influence political outcomes in Venezuela through the use of threat of force or through other means inconsistent with international law. Venezuela's future can be decided only by the Venezuelans. We call on all parties and stakeholders to come together for a negotiated and peaceful transition to democratic rule.
Stephen Lee. Thank you so much, Ez. Once again,
Venezuelans.
Thank you guys so much.
At this critical and uncertain time, it is imperative that all parties fully respect human rights and international law. Denmark remains committed to supporting Venezuela and the aspirations of its people on its path to lasting political stability. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for her statement and now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, President. I congratulate
Denmark was
Somalia
kind of
on the
weak.
assumption of the
Gotta
presidency
be
of the
honest.
Council
They make great
for the month of
points.
January.
They're 100% correct.
And I thank our
They said
briefers
nothing about the
for their
president,
remarks.
which I'm worried.
Colleagues, the Venezuelan people have suffered for years. This council now meets at a pivotal moment for Venezuela's future. Maduro's actions created extreme levels of poverty, violent repression, and failing basic services. His regime's rule precipitated a displacement crisis affecting the whole region. The United Kingdom has long been clear that Maduro's claim to power was fraudulent. To date, Venezuela's National Electoral Council has failed to publish the full results of the July 2024 presidential elections, and independent domestic and international reports also observed significant irregularities and a lack of transparency. President,
thank you so much,
the
Charles
United Kingdom
Osborne.
wants to see a safe
Really,
and peaceful
really
transition
appreciate that,
to a
man.
legitimate government that reflects the will of the Venezuelan people. They deserve a government which reflects their vote at the ballot box and delivers a more stable, prosperous future for all Venezuelans.
Have a good one, Des. Thank you very much.
Finally, President, the United Kingdom reaffirms its commitment to international law and the principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. These foundations are essential for maintaining global peace, security, and the rule of law. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom.
Real quick, we need you guys to know appeasement, UK appeasement live. Yes, exactly. We need you guys to know that I got more stuff coming on. I've got more stuff coming out. I've got our great writers on a topic that is super important. What has happened? Who's next? Our president has threatened to take over or to bomb or to steal resources from an entire hemisphere. Cuba is under the watch. Colombia now, all of a sudden, a name out of nowhere. He's now threatened. Mexico has been threatened. Canada has already been threatened, but I'm not sure if they're taking it seriously enough. We have a Canadian drain coming up soon. Laura Malcolm just posted it to me, just gave it to me, and I think I was giving it to our editor. I think I'm going to edit it myself so that it comes out in due time. All of this is important. All of this is important. We need 100% in the street to stop this. If not 100%, we've lost. Greenland is under threat. Greenland is under threat. I have an entire story about this written by our great writers, Casper Northerner. We have Canadian Drain coming out by Laura Malcolm. Understand, this channel will not leave you to wonder what the truth is. We've got people in places where it's happening. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this. I'm going to show some more. I'm not done. It's very important that we see this, but I wanted you to know that we've got more coming. If you have questions about who's next, that's coming. If you have questions about Canadian response, that's coming. This live is simply about the UN Council and what's happening today, and maybe a little bit about what's happening in New York with the trial of Maduro. All right, let's get back to it.
For his statement, and now give the floor to the representative of France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Je voudrais d'abord vous féliciter pour votre présidence du Conseil de sécurité au mois de janvier. Je voudrais également remercier Madame Rosemary DiCarlo de nous avoir transmis les éléments du secrétaire général des Nations Unies au sujet du dernier développement intervenu. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President,
la France est restée solidaire du peuple vénézuélien dans la crise qu'il traverse depuis de trop nombreuses années, et en particulier depuis l'été 2024. Le 28 juillet 2024,
on the 20th of
le
July
peuple
2024, the Venezuelan people exercised their right to vote peacefully
pour déterminer
in
l'avenir
order
de
to
son pays.
shape the future of their country.
Son droit à choisir ses dirigeants
Their right to choose
lui a
their
néanmoins été
leaders
confisqué
nonetheless has been
par Nicolás
stripped
Maduro.
away from the people by Nicolás
Faut-il le rappeler?
Maduro. Must you recall the
Le
facts?
processus
The
électoral
electoral
avait été
process
marqué
has been
par de
marred,
nombreuses
was
irrégularités
marred by numerous
et le décompte final des
irregularities,
voix
and the final
par une
counting of
absence
votes was
flagrante
marred by
de
a
transparence.
flagrant.
I'm very worried about this talk. It is true. Maduro stole the election. I'm very worried about this talk in the UN Security Council meeting that has been called because of an emergency that we stole him away from the country and told people we're going to put our oil companies there. I'm very worried about this talk in the UN. This is talk for another time. This is an emergency meeting. Where is the condemnation? France? UK? What's happening? I'm very worried about this talk about Maduro. Overwhelmingly, as opposed to the emergency that was called for.
Lack of transparency.
Face à l'aspiration démocratique du peuple vénézuélien,
Nicolás Maduro has systematically responded with the repression of dissident voices, of members of the opposition, and of civil society, as well as with numerous arbitrary detentions. France has always expressed itself with clarity about the fact that these practices are unacceptable and that respect for human rights must be upheld. Mr. President, the military operation which has led to the capture of Nicolás Maduro runs counter to the principle of peaceful dispute resolution and runs counter to the principle of non-use of force. The proliferation of violations of the Charter of the United Nations and the violations of international law by states vested with responsibility as permanent members of the Security Council chips away at the very foundation of the international order, contravening the principles of the Charter, including the principle of respect for independence and the territorial integrity of states, undermines the foundation of the United Nations and weakens international peace and security. France remains faithful and committed to respect for the Charter of the United Nations and of the principle of peaceful dispute resolution. We have an obligation to uphold these principles at all times and in all places. Respect for these principles is indispensable. Mr. President, France wishes to reiterate our commitment to respect for the will of the Venezuelan people. The transition which is currently being opened up for Venezuela needs to be peaceful and democratic and carried out in a manner which respects the choice of the Venezuelan people, a sovereign people. This transition must be led by and for the Venezuelans. France stands ready, alongside states in the region and our partners at the European Union, to uphold dialogue with a view to the restoration of the free, democratic expression in Venezuela. We stand ready to support regional stability. This also needs to be the role of the Security Council. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement, and now give the floor to the representative of Bahrain.
Mr. President, I wish to take...
Do not listen to Midas Touch as they tell you the bubbly process of what's going on. I love them. I'm not trying to diss them. What I'm telling you is what we just heard was bullshit from multiple countries. Appeasement is what we're hearing. No condemnation. I stand with Venezuela, but there's no condemnation for the Security Council permanent member, the US of A, for which this is being called. Not one has mentioned even their fucking name. What is this? What is this? Where's the condemnation? How can you possibly stand with Venezuela without condemning the people that just broached its borders? How can you possibly stand with Venezuela or the rest of the world without mentioning that we just said to you the entire Western Hemisphere is ours to do with what we will in public? Is there no fear? Is there no national memory of the last time this happened? What is wrong with us? Where are you, world? Have you all also become zombies? Like the 30% of Americans who just say, fuck it, I don't care anymore. Get rid of the black people. Where are you? What are we doing here? What is this? Do not listen to the stations that will tell you that somehow this was great today. That somehow, because we have no friends, no one stands with us. That means something. Not one of these people, the only people condemning it are Russia and China. What does that say? We're lost. You're lost, UK. You're lost. France, you are lost. Fucking Denmark, you're lost. What are we doing? Where are we headed? When we don't have the guts to stand up to dictators as they take over other countries and name an entire hemisphere their own. What are we doing? Where are you? What are you doing? France, where are you? What are you doing? Germany, my God, where are you? What are you doing? Jesus fucking Christ, Germany, where are you? Where's your national memory? I'm lost. I'm lost. I'm lost. I'm lost. What are we doing?
This opportunity to congratulate first and foremost the Federal Republic of Somalia on its presidency of the Security Council during this month of January. We wish you every success.
There's no
Mr. Jeffrey Sachs
sorry, guys.
and Mr.
There's no point. I'm gonna see. I want to hear from Venezuela, and we're done here. It's obvious. Welcome to Appeasement Central, to the recreation of World War II. This time with cybernetic technology. Hopefully less bloodshed. America, we used to stand for something, even though we never truly fulfilled the words of our Constitution. It was always assumed that one day we'd get there because we fought in the streets for these rights. We fought kings for these rights. Now is the time. I'm no longer waiting. The world isn't coming. The UN is fallen. NATO is a bust. Now is the time. If you can't fill Washington with 1 million people of our own citizens, then we've lost. If you can't come out or talk out, speak out, make signs, knit something, sew something, open your home, buy canned goods and give it out to people who need it. If you can't show up now, we're lost. We're done. If there's 100 people in the streets protesting this, it's too small. They're not coming to save you. They're not coming.
present to the Security Council a supposed representative of civil society, a person whose public career trajectory bears the hallmarks of sustained funding from foreign governments and transnational corporations. This has been the case for years, as well as participation in processes of political destabilization and the promotion of institutional breakdown in her own country. The instrumental use of this person to legitimize narratives of confrontation, justify the use of force, or minimize violations of international law does not contribute in any way to the purposes of this Council or to the strengthening of multilateralism. On the contrary, it erodes the credibility of the debates and distorts the Security Council's mandate entrusted with the maintenance of international peace and security. Mr. President, on January 3rd, 2026 is a date of profound historical significance, not only for Venezuela, but for the international system as a whole. On that day, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela was the target of an illegitimate armed attack, lacking any legal justification by the government of the United States of America, which included bombing of our territory, the loss of civilian and military lives, the destruction of civilian infrastructure, essential infrastructure, and the kidnapping of the constitutional president of the Republic, Nicolás Maduro Moras, and the First Lady, Celia Flores. Venezuela comes before this Council today with a deep conviction that international peace can only be sustained if international law is respected without exception, without double standards, and without selective interpretations. The events of January 3rd constitute a flagrant violation of the UN Charter, perpetrated by the US government, in particular, the violation of the principle of sovereign equality of states, of the absolute prohibition of the use or threat of use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, as enshrined in Article 2, Paragraph 4. And a violation of the duty to settle disputes by peaceful means. Similarly, these acts also seriously violate the Geneva Conventions and its protocols, as indiscriminate attacks were carried out against the civilian population and assets. International human rights law has also been violated, particularly the right to life, personal integrity, and security. Of particular seriousness is the kidnapping of the President of the Republic by the government of the United States of America, which constitutes a direct violation of an essential norm of the international legal order, namely the personal immunity of heads of state in office. This immunity is not an individual privilege. It is an institutional guarantee that protects the sovereignty of states and the stability of the international system. Its disregard not only affects Venezuela, but also sets an extremely dangerous precedent for all states represented in this chamber, regardless of their size, power, or alliances.
And the fact they don't see that is
Mr. President, General Assembly Resolution 3314 clearly defines as an act of aggression the bombing of the territory of one state by the armed forces of another state, as well as the invasion or occupation, even without formal annexation. The events we are denouncing here unequivocally fit this definition. In 2004, the International Court of Justice affirmed that occupation exists when a state exercises effective control, even without formal annexation or the continuous presence of troops. Security Council Resolution 242, for its part, emphasizes that the acquisition of territory by force is inadmissible, while General Assembly Resolution 2625 establishes that the territory of a state shall not be subject to military occupation as a result of the use of force in contravention of the UN Charter. Allowing such acts to go without an effective answer would amount to normalizing the replacement of law by might, while eroding the very foundations of the collective security system. Today, it is not only Venezuela's sovereignty that is at stake, the credibility of international law, the authority of this organization, and the validity of the principle that no state can set itself up as the judge, party, and executor of the world order are also at stake. Mr. President, we cannot ignore a central element of this U.S. aggression. Venezuela is the victim of these attacks because of its natural resources. Our country's oil, energy, strategic resources, and geopolitical position have historically been factors of greed and external pressure. When force is used to control resources, impose governments, or redesign states, we are faced with a logic that harks back to the worst practices of colonialism and neocolonialism. Accepting such a logic would mean to open the door to a deeply unstable world in which countries with greater military capacities can decide by force the political and economic destinies of other states. This scenario not only threatens Venezuela, it threatens international peace and security as a whole. If the kidnapping of a head of state, the bombing of a sovereign country, and the open threat of further armed action are tolerated or downplayed, the message sent to the world is a devastating one, namely that the law is optional and that force is the true arbiter of international relations. Venezuela firmly believes in diplomacy, dialogue, and peaceful coexistence among nations. That has always been our historical position, and it remains so today, even in the face of an aggression of this magnitude. It is precisely that commitment to peace, the one that was violated on the 3rd of January. Therefore, Venezuela urges the Security Council to fully assume its responsibility and to act in accordance with the mandate conferred upon it by the Charter of the United Nations. In that regard, we request, A, that the government of the United States of America be demanded to fully respect the immunities of President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Celia Flores, as well as their immediate release and safe return to Venezuela. 2, that the use of force against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela be clearly and unequivocally condemned. Thirdly, that the principle of non-acquisition of territory or resources by force be reaffirmed. And 4, that measures aimed at de-escalation, the protection of the civilian population, and the restoration of international law be adopted. Mr. President, in spite of the seriousness of the events, Venezuela would like to inform this body and the international community that its institutions are functioning normally, that constitutional order has been preserved, and that the state exercises effective control over all of its territory. In accordance with our Constitution, Executive Vice President Delcy Rodriguez is being sworn in as acting President of the Republic, thereby guaranteeing institutional continuity, stability, and internal peace. We wish to convey a message of serenity, confidence, and hope to the Venezuelan people. Venezuela is a nation that believes in peace, work, and dignity. Our commitment is to diplomacy and law, and the law is firm and unwavering. We defend our sovereignty without renouncing our values. We bet on dialogue without accepting imposition. We believe in a future of coexistence, development, and mutual respect among nations. We trust that the Security Council will rise to the historic moment of facing humanity and choose the path of legality, collective responsibility, and peace. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the representative.
We're done here. We're finished here. We see where we are. There's no need to belabor the point. Many of you are fearful and are very scared at what's to come. Some of you have asked me what needs to be done. If you go through this, there are societies, there are places, 5051, answercoalition.org, answercoalition.org. There are places to coalesce, to start marching. If there's not enough of us doing that, then we've lost. Fine, that's fear. Now that we've actually started the war, I'm going to leave you with this, and I'm going to do it quickly. Now that we're actually in a war, it seems like the language of war may be more palatable. Maybe now when I say this, it will resonate instead of push away like it has for the past year. Now that we're in a war, the language of war may be more palatable. In wartime, there are two emotions: fear, anger, or rage. In wartime, there are two emotions: fear, or anger/rage. The reactions to those emotions are what will predict the end of this. Fear is justified. Fear will keep you alive in the moment when you react properly. If you get, statue, if you freeze during fear, that reaction will get you hurt. But if you run quickly during fear, that reaction can save your life, can cause you to fight another day. What you need to do is practice not freezing. Practice not freezing. Imagine yourself outside. Go outside. Go with a picket sign. Get hurt. Watch people get hurt and help them up. This is called practice. This is called training. What we've been doing for the past year has been training to control our fear response. The other is anger. Some people get angry and hurt themselves, punch the walls. That is the improper response to the fear emotion. To the anger emotion. The proper response is get up, get mad. Do not take no for an answer. Get up now. The next time that you hear that there's a website that has somebody saying there's a protest, click on it now. Be there now. Take all of your money, throw it away, burn it, or use it to go to a protest. It means nothing. It means nothing if you're not using it to support and feed the anger inside of you. Do you understand me? Everything you thought was important, it's not. As we take over an entire continent and a hemisphere that we claim is ours, we've been here before. And appeasement runs rampant around the world. We've been here before. Use your money into your anger and come outside now. Time to fight is now.